welcome to my allotment. Today I'm going to give you a tour of my allotment. This is going to be my August tour of my allotment. So I'm going to be going through everything that I'm doing. And how everything's doing, because there's lots of people talking about whether this year has been good or worse than last year. Well, there's definitely winners and losers, and I'll leave you to decide what you think about my allotment. Now, if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so. I'll give you lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my home garden, my home allotment, and also my home kitchen. So first of all, I've actually got up here really early. We've had a little bit of rain, it's been a little bit windy, so hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with the recording. I pulled up my broad beans and I picked them. Now unfortunately, I think I had what's called rust on it, so they're on my compost, so the leaves went really brown and in fact almost looked like blight, but you don't get blight on your beans as far as I'm aware. So if anyone knows what this is, be really great for any input from anyone, but I think it's a really bad case of rust, but if I'm honest, I'm not sure. So unfortunately my broad beans didn't do as well as I hoped they would, but I have got a nice big bag full which I'm going to pod and then freeze, so I have got some, so it's not all bad. So my rhubarb is doing quite well. Now we always get this debate whether or not we should be picking it when there's not an R in the month, but like I've said before, if it's looking really good then pick it, but just don't pick it bare. It just won't be as sweet, but it's still perfectly lovely. But as you can see, I've got loads of stems on here. Obviously a little bit of bindweed, which we need to pull out. So my pear tree, well, I'm not sure what's happening here. So I've got some kind of disease on it now. I suspect that the ones that have got the disease on them, there's nothing I can do with it, and I'm just hoping that it doesn't affect the ones that do look okay. So again, I don't know what this is. If anyone does know, if you can let me know, I'd be really interested to know, and if there's anything I can do to help it. My Bramley apples are starting to get a little bit bigger. Now I do hope they swell out a little bit more than that, because they are a little bit diddy. We have had lots of rain, so I'm surprised they're not looking bigger already, but we'll see. I might ask my father-in-law how his are doing. As we move down, we're going to be looking at various things. In particular, we're going to be looking at my potatoes in a bit, so I can talk about potato blight and see what anyone thinks about that. But my raspberries, actually, it's been a really good year. A really good year. I've had much more raspberries. They've been much bigger thanks to the rain. So this has actually been one of the winners. And even though we haven't had much sun, they still have ripened really well and they've tasted really lovely. So I've got a freezer full of raspberries and only a few more raspberries to pick. As we move down, the cherry tree, well, the birds got them. I never get many on them, so I'm definitely going to have to look into how I can care for that a little bit more, because it's something that never really produces that much. My blackberries are just starting to produce, and I've had a few of those already. So this looks like the same as any other year. I've absolutely got tons of berries on there, and they're filling out beautifully. Nice big blackberries, and the few that I've had so far have been really lovely. So far so good. My gooseberries were an average crop. I've either eaten them or they're in the freezer. My black currants were perfectly okay, but the birds got them, so that's a note to me. I need to cover them sooner. So that was nothing to do with the weather. However, the birds have been much worse this year attacking things. As we move down to the cabbages, they're doing really well, and I have pulled a few of my cabbages. So I suppose the worst thing I've had with my cabbages is a bit of slug damage. Now that one looks really bad, but to be honest, the rest haven't been too bad at all. This double covering of Enviromesh and the scaffolding net just works really, really well, keeping the white cabbage butterfly and also the white fly off of them. You do get a wee bit of white fly, but nothing like you normally do. Same with my kale, and if anything, my kale this year I think has been the best I've had for a long time, if I'm honest with you. Beautiful kale, and with this double netting you don't get all the distortion and the marks on the leaves from various different types of pests, so it's really quite lovely. It's actually quite hard to give away kale, because when you grow it on an allotment it can look really quite shabby compared to the stuff you buy in the shops, but if you double net like I do, it really does produce fantastic kale. And my chard, apart from the initial bird damage that I got when I initially put them in, when I then covered them and waited for them to get a bit bigger, I mean, my chard just looks absolutely fantastic. So I've been eating plenty of that. My sweet corn is behind, but you know what? That was my own fault. I didn't put this in anywhere near soon enough. I tell you what happened. Last year, most of our sweet corn got eaten by some kind of wild animal, and there was much debate on the allotment whether it was birds, whether it was foxes, whether it was badgers, whether it was rats. And do you know what? No one really knew. At the end of the day, we all pretty much lost our sweet corn. So I think I was procrastinating about planting it, and then I decided to plant a small amount and then protect it. But I don't have to protect it at the moment because there's no cobs on it. But as soon as I see cobs, I will be putting a barrier around it to protect it. So as we move down, I don't know if you remember, I had this covered with some really thick fleece to stop the birds from attacking it. Now I only put this lettuce and these beetroots in about a month ago, and I think covering them with a little bit of fleece has actually really protected them a lot, because they've actually come on really, really well. In fact, some of the lettuces there have actually bolted just a wee bit, so they've actually done a little bit too well. But yeah, so I can't grumble at that. So that's some seeds. If you've not put any more beetroot in, if you get it in quick, you could put some more beetroot seed in. But I would be getting it in quickly the next week or two. Don't hesitate. My leeks are looking really good. I lost some, but that was because of the birds. That was nothing to do with the weather. They literally pulled some out and played with them. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but I thinned out some of my parsnips and I planted them in the gaps where the birds had taken the leeks out of. And when I first did it, I didn't actually do another video on it because they looked so pitiful. I actually didn't think that these parsnips had transplanted, but actually most of the ones that I transplanted on, look, the leaves are all growing. So that was at my father-in-law's suggestion to do that. So we'll see. Only time will tell in a few months' time as to whether that was worthwhile or not. But at the end of the day, nothing else was going to go in there, and I had parsnip thinnings. I needed to do something with it. So as we move down, the leeks are looking really good, so I will be lifting those really soon. The onions are ready when they flopped over. Now, some of them won't flop over, and the reason that is because I don't know if you remembered that when these are growing, sometimes they form a bud and you break the bud off. Now, if you get that, the stem often gets very hard and it will never flop over like the other ones do. Now, what you do with those is you can still eat them, but you eat them first because chances are they won't store as well. So when I dig these up, any that haven't flopped over and they've got a really stiff stem, I will keep them separate and I will eat them first, and I will store the others throughout the winter. So this is where my broad beans were, which obviously I've pulled the canes up and I've lifted them, so I need to give that a good dig over and a good weed. So over here are the Cape gooseberries. These are the ones that I was given as a gift. So I've no idea whether these are doing any better or worse than they normally do, because I've never grown them before. So the only time I've ever had them is in a restaurant on the side of a cheesecake. So it'd be really interesting to see what they're like, and I'm really hoping to get some, because that's like something I've never grown before, and it's really quite fun to grow something different. So as we move over, you've got the dahlias. Now, it looks a little bit bare, but that's only because a couple of days ago, literally, I cut loads of the flowers off to have in my house and also to give away as gifts for people. But they are actually producing really beautiful flowers. It's a really easy one to grow on the allotment, and you just get bountiful amounts of flowers, which are really, really lovely to have in the house. Something that really cheered me up during lockdown was having my own flowers and being able to give them to people to cheer them up too. So as we move over, now I'm going to talk about blight here. Obviously, lots of people are getting it on their tomatoes, but these are my potatoes. Now, it's really hard to tell whether you've got blight on your potatoes at the same time you have dieback. So I had exactly that issue here. I've dug some of mine up already, and what I've done is I've cut them off at the stems. And cutting them off at the stems protects the tubers that are in the ground from the blight getting any worse. Now, when mine died back, I had some browning and yellowing of the leaves, and I'm not RHS trained. It was impossible for me to tell whether it was blight or dieback, but because there's so much of the blight, I wasn't taking any chances. I didn't have any black on the actual stems that I could really see, so it possibly was just dieback, and if there was any blight on it, it was just on the tips of the leaves. But I took the precaution to cut all the potatoes back to the ground, because either way the leaves had all flopped over. They weren't going to be doing much more underground. And I have dug some of my potatoes and they are perfect. And I've also dug some of the later potatoes just to do a test patch to see whether they were big enough. And again, they had grown enough, so it could just as easily have been dieback. I normally dig my potatoes as I need them and keep them in the ground, apart from when it gets towards the end of the season, and then I dig them all up, because obviously the frost can adversely affect them, and also you get more slug damage. But because there's been so much blight this year, I am going to be digging them up over the next, over the course of the next couple of weeks and storing them, because I don't want to take any chances. Now, any potatoes that you dig up that are damaged, you always eat them first, because they won't store as well. Now, if you're not sure whether you've got blight on your potatoes, now if you cut one open, or you might see on the skin, you'll get a browning on the potato. Now, you will always get one potato that you dig up will be soft and mushy, because that's your seed potato. So don't panic if one potato is mushy. That might just be the seed potato, which obviously you don't eat and you discard. But if you generally cut them open and you've got brown marks inside them, then you might do. I haven't so far, they've all been okay. The only thing I've had is a little bit of wireworm, but the blight can form while it's in the sack after I've dug it, so I'm just going to have to hope that they're okay. But so far it's looking good. If you've got any questions about that, then do put them in the comments and I'll do my best to help you. But you just have to do your best when you get a year where blight is bad. Now, my carrots are looking really good. I haven't dug any yet, but I will be very soon, because I still have some that I've bought. But as I lift this up, and I have had a quick look over the last few weeks, they really are starting to fill out. So they are definitely okay to pull there, and obviously I'll pull the bigger ones first. So probably once I finish those ones in the fridge, I will be picking my own, which will be absolutely awesome. I cover with EnviroMesh. I've said this before, because it really helps with the carrot fly. So it might not stop it completely, but it will stop you from getting a bad case of carrot fly. I do this every year, same piece. Doesn't matter, it's got a little hole in it, because carrot fly at a low level anyway. Does a really good job and generally gives me much better carrots ever since I've been using this. I've had this piece several years, although it's quite expensive when you first buy it. I've never thrown a bit of EnviroMesh out yet, because it's so tough. So that's really good. So the beet roots are doing really, really well. I picked some the other day. I made a cumin salad with mine, a really lovely river cottage recipe. So what I do is I don't thin my beet roots out when I first sow them. I literally sow them. As they get bigger, I pull out the biggest ones and I eat them, and that in turn thins them out. And then gradually I just pick them out, all the bigger ones, so I don't end up wasting any. And my parsnips are there as well. They're doing really well, but obviously quite some months before they'll be ready to dig. And the fennels that I planted are doing really beautifully. So I've left them covered, because those pesky birds will have a go given half a chance, because they're too beautiful and delicate. But they are doing really well, so I'm looking forward to getting some of those. That little bit of lettuce is starting to bolt, but I've got more over there anyway, so that's fine. I'll probably sow another row of lettuce in one of the gaps I've got. So that cut and come again lettuce is, again, this month you could be popping a little bit of lettuce seed in the ground. It'll grow really quickly because it's so mild. I would cover it like I did with those ones. I'd put some EnviroMesh on. My beans are a bit behind. Now, I could blame the weather on this, but I know I didn't put them in soon enough. Got no one else to blame apart from myself. I can't blame the weather, because I went around my friend's yesterday, and she's a first-time gardener, and hers are looking absolutely amazing, because she was on the ball and she got them in good and early. But I have got a few beans. As you can see, there's lots of beautiful bloom there. So beans are not far off on those runner beans. I've got a mixture of French beans and runner beans here. So it's the French beans that I've actually started picking. I've got a mixed variety of green, yellow and the lovely deep purple. So actually really quite lovely. I love growing multicoloured beans and peas, because it does make life a bit more interesting. One of the bonuses of having an allotment, that you can create variety. As we move up, my courgettes are doing really well as well. They're all across the edge, all the courgettes, and I've been picking those as and when they're big enough. I've had some really big ones sneak up on me, so because of all the rain, but it's not all bad. Some of my friends have been giving some gifts of courgettes. Some people say it with flowers, I say it with vegetables. So my squashes and pumpkins are doing really well as well. I've got some, you don't pick those yet, just in case you're wondering. I've got seen lots of questions about whether when you pick those, you wait until later in the year, like late September to October time. Again, I'll show you when you need to pick them. The fruit inside needs to mature, otherwise it won't taste as nice, basically. So I've got a variety of squashes in here. I can't exactly remember all the varieties, but I've got a mixture of Turk's turban, spaghetti squash. I think I've got something called honey bear, I've got some traditional pumpkins. I've got butternut, albeit I planted butternut, but I can't actually find any in there. So I might have to do a trade-off with my father-in-law, because I've got tons of spaghetti squash and he's got tons of butternut. So I'm going to see if we can do a little bit of swapsies, because it's nice to have different types. If you've never grown spaghetti squash, it's really quite lovely. And because when you bake it and you slice it open and you pull the flesh, it is actually like spaghetti. So it's really quite lovely. It's a really nice, fun thing to grow. So I hope that's really helped everybody. As you can see, my allotment isn't perfect. There are weeds, but the main thing to bear in mind is that the plants that you're growing your vegetables and your fruit off are producing fruit. You know, that's the most important thing, is that. So, you know, we do the best we can with weeding, but as long as we get plenty of food to eat, that you're always going to get another allotment that's better looked after than yours, but you can't look at everyone else's. You just have to make sure that you're getting some fruit and vegetables off of it. That's the main thing. Now, if there's anything you're not sure about, if you've got any questions or queries, or if you've got anything that could help me, I'm always interested to hear what people are up to. If you're a newcomer and you've got any questions or queries, I'm always happy to help, and it's always great to hear what everyone else is doing and any helpful hints and tips. I had one a little while ago about bringing my dahlias back in a plastic milk bottle. It's a really good way of recycling it, and actually it's a much easier way of bringing my dahlias back rather than the jar I was using. So thanks for that tip. It was really brilliant, and I recommend that to anyone else too. So I hope everyone's doing well, and I look forward to seeing you soon on my next video.